get started with our 9th annual Domestic Violence Symposium and Resource Fair. This year, Building Bridges, Making Connections, Survivors on the Margin. Thank you so much for joining us here today. Let me start by saying I want to thank our premier sponsor, DeKalb County District 5 Commissioner Marita Davis Johnson, for helping us, for being a strong partner, and to make sure that we could once again put on this resource fair. I have not yet seen her this morning, but when she makes it in, we will go ahead and recognize her then. But we truly appreciate her support for our symposium and our year-round efforts to raise awareness and create strategies for combating and ending domestic violence. We also want to thank all of our participants in the room, and they are listed in your program, but I want to make sure that I recognize all of the folks that are in here. They are on the back of your program. I'm going to go in order in the program so that I don't try to miss anybody by looking at their tables around the room when my vision isn't that great. So I'm going to go from the program. I'd like to obviously thank the DeKalb County District Attorney's Office, in particular our Domestic Violence and Sexual Assault Unit. We have a Hensma House, the Atlanta Legal Aid Society, Caminar Latino, the Center for Pan-Asian Community Services, Cherokee Family Violence Center, the Day League, the DeKalb County Board of Health, the DeKalb County Clerk of Superior Court, Deborah Dewberry, and her staff, DeKalb County Magistrate Court, the Temporary Protective Orders Unit, DeKalb County Police Department, the Special Victims Unit, DeKalb County Sheriff's Office, led by Sheriff Jeff Mann, the DeKalb County Solicitor General's Office and their Special Victims Unit, led by Solicitor General Donna Coleman Stribling, the DeKalb Volunteer Lawyers Foundation, the Georgia Asylum and Immigration Network, the Georgia Center for Child Advocacy, the Georgia Coalition Against Domestic Violence, the Georgia Commission on Family Violence, Georgia Equality, the Georgia Office of Victim Services, International Rescue Committee, International Women's House, the Jewish Family and Career Services of Atlanta, Kids in Needs of Defense, KIND, the Latin American Association, Men Stopping Violence, Raksha, Sur Familia, Tapestry, Vine, and Women's Resource Center to End Domestic Violence. Can we give all of our sponsors and partners and resource members a round of applause? Did I leave anyone out? Wonderful. That's what I aim to do, to make sure we recognize our partners, because really what we say every day is we have a coordinated response, a coordinated community response to domestic violence here in DeKalb, and I am so grateful for all the resources that we have here in DeKalb County so that we can continue to make sure that we can support our victims and our survivors of domestic violence every day. So just a few housekeeping notes. I hope that when you came in to the entryway that you had an opportunity to sign our poster today to support the I Say No More campaign to domestic violence. No More is a national effort to increase awareness and develop proactive strategies to end domestic violence as well as sexual assault. During our program, you will have an opportunity to create your individual No More sign as you contemplate the ways in which we can all join forces to fight domestic violence. We invite you to take selfies. Some of you have already taken advantage of that. Next to our balloon display right here, and with your No More signs during breaks and at the end of our program. Feel free to post and tweet throughout the day. This is an opportunity where I want you to pull out your phones. I want you to engage on your social media. And the only thing I ask that when you're doing that is please be sure to tag us, because we want to get as much traffic going today. We want people to know what we're doing, and we want to give people an opportunity. And everyone will have these No More signs. You can have an opportunity to pick those up and write on there what you are saying no more to. There are lots of things that we did last year. I think I wrote no more shaming victims. Whatever you want no more to be about when it comes to domestic violence and sexual assault, that's what we want you to write on your no more sheet. And we want you to take those selfies. So how do you tag us on social media? Well, I'm on Facebook at Sherry Boston DA. I'm on Twitter on Sherry Boston DA. And I'm on Instagram, Sherry Boston DA. So it should be easy for you to find us. Our custom hashtag for this event today is hashtag. And for those of you that still don't know what hashtag is, that's like the little crisscross sign, y'all. Okay? Pound sign. Pound sign, crisscross, hashtag. Just make sure you do that. And it's hashtag Boston Building Bridges. And you can also use the national hashtag no more or hashtag NDV. Or you can use all three. We'd like to get that trending today. We'd like people to know what we're doing. Again, October is the month where we want to especially recognize our campaign to end domestic violence. Finally, if you haven't also done, when you came in, we also have sign-up sheets so that you can be on our email list for all of our future events. So now it's time to have a frank discussion about a serious issue. Domestic violence is a pervasive public health problem. And let me just not say problem, it is an epidemic, impacting a victim, their families, their friends, workplaces, and communities. Truth is, it's not just somebody else's problem. Each of us has a role to play in building awareness and working proactively to end domestic violence. As your district attorney, I oversee the prosecution of thousands of felony crimes each year, which sadly include domestic violence offenses, some of which, unfortunately, are fatal. The reason that we host this symposium each year is that we know by coming together as a community to raise awareness about domestic violence, we can help save lives. There is no more fitting time than now, the National Domestic Violence Awareness Month, to discuss and develop strategies for prevention. Domestic violence is real. The statistics are sobering. In the United States, an average of 20 people are physically abused by intimate partners every minute. This equates to more than 10 million abuse victims annually. 1 in 3 women and 1 in 4 men have been physically abused by an intimate partner. On a typical day, domestic violence hotlines nationwide receive over 20,000 calls. The presence of a gun in a domestic violence situation increases the risk of homicide by 500%. In Georgia, there were 143 domestic violence-related deaths in 2018. In DeKalb, there were 9 domestic violence-related deaths. Even 1 is too many. In Fulton, 13, Cobb, 5, Gwinnett, 10, Henry, 3, and Clayton, 9. 71% of those deaths were by firearm. By coming together as a community, we know we can prevent future cases of domestic violence, and we can help survivors get the assistance that they need. If you or someone you know is suffering in an abusive relationship, I encourage you to seek help. You can start with me and my team if you don't know where to turn. And from there, let me start. If you are a member of my team, the DeKalb County District Attorney's Office, as a victim advocate, an attorney, an investigator, a paralegal, a trial assistant, anyone who lends help in our office, could you please stand and be recognized? Thank you so much for your support. Stay standing. Stay standing. Now, you know this room is full of people that can help support, but I want you to know that each and every one of the persons that are standing here today, if you're in the room and you need assistance or a question, you can reach out to each one of these people. Now, remain standing. I'd like all of our resource participants to stand, please. Resource participants, our advocates, our community partners, please stand. As you can see around this room, we have additional resources so that if you are in this room, every person you see standing right now is someone that can assist you in a way if you need help. No matter what language you speak, no matter what your circumstances are, whether you want to seek the criminal justice system or a civil protective order, or you just want assistance in a safety plan, every person that's standing right now are our partners and are our coordinated community response to end domestic violence. Thank you so much. Have a seat. Thank you. And just a reminder, we are not live this year, but we do have DCTV taping this, and we are transmitting this via Facebook Live. So I want everyone watching to know that if you're not in this room and you can't be here today, but you hear this and it resonates with you, you hear this and you say, I have a friend or family member that needs help and resources. You hear this and you say, I'm not sure what to do. You can also call the toll-free 24-hour confidential Georgia statewide domestic violence hotline at 1-800-33-HAVEN. That's 1-800-334-2836. And if you are in immediate danger and you're watching this, call 911 if you need immediate assistance. We understand the challenges that victims face, that leaving an abuser is often the most dangerous time in a victim's life. And we want to be here for those victims when they are ready to take the next step toward becoming a survivor, to help them get the resources they need to stay safe during the process. As we continue to spread awareness this month and beyond, we hope you will join us in sharing news about our symposium and our efforts to fight domestic violence on your social media pages, by tweeting, posting to Facebook or Instagram, or any place that you want to help spread awareness. Because the more that we talk about it, the more we're able to get information to victims who need it. Today, we'll take a deeper look into domestic violence and all of its related components, specifically focused today on our marginalized communities. We hope to dispel myths, shed some light, and more importantly, save lives. This year, for those of you, and I know some of you have been here every single year. If you have been here every single year, if this is your 9th year, I want you to stand up. If this is your 9th year of being in our program, being here, whether as a community partner or whether as a participant, I want you to stand up. That's amazing. Thank you so much. But so you'll know if you've been here every year, we try to find ways to make this symposium fresh. We want people to come back year after year if we're forced to have this symposium, right? I'd be happy to cancel it next year if we can eradicate domestic violence, right? But yes, let's clap for that. I'd be happy, I'm going to say it, and I hope everybody's catching this, I'd be happy to be out of a job if we could find a way to end this violence and crime in our community. And I think everybody would be okay putting me out of a job if I could do that, right? Let's clap for that. That's not a bad thing. Now, some of my staff members are like, Sherry, we still got to have a job, right? Y'all know I always find a place for you to land, right? Always. But more importantly, we wanted to do things a little bit different this year, so we're going to do something a little bit more interactive and engaging. So if you are in the room, we're going to ask you to be active and an active participant in our program today. Throughout the morning, you're going to have an opportunity to break off into small groups for intimate and personalized discussions aimed at learning more about domestic violence and arming each of us with the tools of empowerment. So as I stated in the beginning, we couldn't have done this program today without the help and support and sponsorship of Commissioner Marita Davis Johnson. And right now we have with us Demetrius McCoy, who works for the Commissioner and represents the Commissioner. Let's give him a round of applause and give him an opportunity to bring greetings on behalf of the Commissioner.
Good morning, everyone. How are you this morning? All right, you sound like you're a little bit sleepy. You're getting ready to go through the 9th annual symposium that's put on by our wonderful district attorney. Can you all give her a hand? So now that your energy's up, I'll say good morning again.
Good morning.
On behalf of Commissioner Marita Davis Johnson, I'm so happy to bring greetings. And we're very proud to sponsor this initiative and to continue to support. Recently, the Commissioner announced funding to support to do everything that we can to end domestic violence here in DeKalb County. So again, we're so proud to be here. We know that you've got a full day today, and we want to continue to offer our support to you, Madam District Attorney, as well as everyone who's in this fight together. So thank you again for allowing us to speak.
Thank you. And I'm going to have you stand here for just a second because Demetrius was being modest when he said they've given us support. Some of you may already know this from if you watch or attend the BOC meetings, but Commissioner Davis Johnson committed out of her funding for her budget $75,000 grant directly to the District Attorney's Office that we are using to bring a 4-day training of the Strangulation Institute for law enforcement, community advocates, investigators, and emergency personnel that deal with domestic violence so that we can make better cases and serve our victims on strangulation cases. So can we please give our Commissioner a round of applause for her leadership. Thank you so much for being here. And we look forward to sharing you more information about that program when we roll that out in the beginning of 2020. So, our first discussion, like I said, approximately 20% of female high school students and 10% of male students have experienced physical or sexual dating violence. And only 33% of teen dating abuse victims ever tell anyone. 1 in 3 adolescents in the U.S. is a victim of physical, sexual, emotional, or verbal abuse from a dating partner, a figure that far exceeds all other types of youth violence. 81% of parents believe teen dating violence is not an issue or admit that they didn't know it was an issue. Girls and young women between the ages of 16 and 24 experience the highest rate of intimate partner violence, almost triple the national average. And nearly half, 43%, of dating college women report experiencing violent and abusive dating behaviors. These are sobering statistics that we cannot afford to ignore. Our young people's lives and well-being are at stake. Here to lead this discussion is Samantha Machado, the Vice President of Prevention and Outreach Services at Partnership Against Domestic Violence, and Chastity Rogers, the Director of Victim Services for the Office of the DeKalb County District Attorney's Office. Ladies, I'm going to turn this over to you.
All right, so good morning, everyone. My name is Samantha Macedo, and I'm with Partnership Against Domestic Violence, one of the domestic violence agencies here in the state of Georgia. My role there is as Vice President of Prevention and Outreach, and what that means is that I get to manage 3 different programs. One of them is our legal advocacy for Fulton and Gwinnett counties, our outreach program, and of course our teen dating violence prevention program.
Great.
Good morning, everyone. I am Chastity Rogers. I'm the Director of Victim Services with the DeKalb County District Attorney's Office, and I get to work with a team of wonderful advocates that are the first point of contact for survivors of crime, survivors of domestic violence, and survivors of sexual assault.
So, as we heard just a few seconds ago, one of the stats that was shared was 1 in 3 adolescents in the United States is a victim of physical, sexual, emotional, or verbal abuse from a dating partner. How many of you did not know that that was an epidemic among our youth, among our teens? Raise your hand, yeah. Right. And so that is one of the main issues that as our organization works with preventing, we know that we have to be able to respond to victims of intimate partner violence, and in particular with our our youth community, the part of preventing this kind of epidemic really has to do a lot more with sharing some information, preparing resources for them to reach out to, and of course creating the team leadership that can help support those initiatives. So to give you an example, the work on prevention is really about creating a new norm, creating the kind of culture among our youth where abuse in dating relationships this is not the place for it, right? And so how do we do that? The theme today is building bridges. So I want you guys to think about, as we move through our discussion piece in this section, what are the areas, what are the gaps that we need to stand on to really not talk down to young people, but talk with, stand with, share the information about dating violence warning signs and what does it look like. Yes, outside of physical abuse, what is abuse through technology, what is emotional abuse, what is sexual abuse outside of rape and sexual harassment, and then create those resources where they feel comfortable and able to reach out for help.
So our goal today is to make sure that this is an interactive discussion, making sure that we have tons of people participating today. The second stat that was given was 81% of parents believe teen dating violence is not an issue. How many of us have heard that before, where we've either had an opportunity to work with children, work with teens, work with parents, and most of them will say, I didn't think it was a big deal. How many of us have experienced that? Let me see your hands. Why do we think that is? Let's generate some discussion around that. Why do we think that in our communities, many of our parents don't feel like it's an issue? Not everybody speak at once. Can I get someone to respond to that? Sure.
Probably think that if something like that happened to their teen, I think they think that teen would share that with them. As a parent, a lot of times teens are not sharing that information.
Absolutely. So maybe it's the fear of sharing that information or judgment and thinking of, what is someone going to think about me if I share this? Does this mean that I'm a weak individual if I'm allowing this to happen to me? And so what we want to do as a community is make sure that we are educating our parents as well as the children so that they understand what teen dating violence is, what it looks like, and they can hone in on that very quickly and also help their peers with that. Okay, and so what we want to do, you want to go ahead and go through the third stat? Okay.
The third stat talks about girls and young women between the ages of 16 and 24 experience the highest rate of intimate partner violence, almost triple of the national average. Again, young girls of ages 16 and 24. So a lot of times when we do our presentations to young people and we talk about the stats of 1 in 3 and young girls of ages 16 and 24, we specifically go out to high schools and colleges to give information about dating violence. And with the stat 1 in 3, for example, we usually say, look to your left, look to your right. Among you, there is someone who's experiencing dating violence. So what does this mean in your own community? Does anybody want to say? Offer a thought on that? Again, the stat is young girls ages 16 and 24. How many young girls ages 16 and 24 do you know? Do you have access to? Do you bump into? So what does it mean in your community to have this group experience the highest rates of intimate partner violence? We have a lot of work to do. Yes, thank you. We have a lot of work to do.
The last stat, nearly half, 43% of dating college women report experiencing violent and abusive dating behaviors. I'm going to read that again. Nearly half, of dating college women report experiencing violent and abusive dating behaviors. What do we think this particular stat means as it relates to the college arena? Individuals that are attending college, women that are attending college. If more than half of the women that are attending, just think about that, more than half. We didn't say 10%, we didn't say 5%, we said more than half. Does anyone have any thoughts about that? I just heard wow here.
Scary.
Absolutely, that's scary. And it's definitely scary for new parents that have children going off to college, right? I have a 16-year-old that will be going to college soon. And I have to have a discussion with her about definitely what dating violence looks like. And now knowing that more than half of those individuals that are going to be entering that arena with her may also experience some form of dating violence. And so what we're going to do at this point is we're going to have the opportunity to break out into sessions. We're going to give you all 2 questions to think about and give responses. So you'll get into your groups, you'll talk about these things and what we can do as a community to help eradicate domestic violence or to help educate those individuals that are experiencing domestic violence.
So we need help finding a group. I think ideally 3 to 4 people in a group is great. So look around your area, look around your seating area, and find about 3 other folks that you want to have this conversation with. And we'll be coming around to help you with the conversation.
We're going to now turn our attention to the LGBTQ community. First, this snapshot. 20% of LGBT victims have experienced some form of physical violence. In a study of same-sex relationships, only 26% of men called the police for assistance after experiencing near-lethal violence. Transgendered victims are more likely to experience intimate partner violence in public compared to those who do not identify as transgender. Prior experiences of physical or psychological trauma, such as bullying and hate crimes, may make LGBTQ victims of domestic violence less likely to seek help. For this part of our discussion, I'd like to welcome our facilitators, Chanel Haley, the General Policy Manager of Georgia Equality, and Jenny Asman, the Program Manager at the Georgia Commission on Family Violence.
Good morning. Good morning. Everybody nice and awake now? You know you had your breakfast, you want to go back to sleep? So my name is Chanel Haley. I'm the Gender Policy Manager at Georgia Equality. Georgia Equality is a statewide LGBT education advocacy organization. We do several different things, but mainly what I do on the C3 side is I advocate for policy change within organizations. That includes municipalities, in government, businesses, corporations, universities, colleges, and even in nonprofits. Healthcare, and what I try to get is to get them to do sexual orientation and gender identity within the policies, because of course in the state of Georgia, there absolutely is no state protections for the LGBT community whatsoever across the board. And so when it comes to domestic violence, or any other fields you can think of, Georgia Equality is usually the first place people come to for the education and the outreach within a community.
I'd like to thank District Attorney Boston and her office for bringing us here today to talk about this important issue happening within the LGBTQ community. Despite the prevailing myth that this is happening maybe only to heterosexual cisgender women, we are experiencing domestic violence in the LGBTQ community at the same rate And some research suggests even a little bit higher than the other populations in our communities. And a lot of the dynamics that happen in LGBTQ relationships with domestic violence, it does look pretty similar, but there are unique dynamics that are happening and unique barriers that result in some of the stats that DA Boston shared with us. And unfortunately, since 2013, 20 individuals from the LGBTQ community have lost their lives due to domestic violence here in Georgia. So it is an issue that we need to be looking at, addressing, and trying to expand our services to make sure that they're accessible and ready to serve people in this community. Yeah.
Absolutely. And several of those, the murders that people have heard about on the timeline of Facebook, or you've seen some kind of interviews. I know Nightline did a special on it around the trans woman that's been murdered in the recent years. And I want to make a note that you're hearing about it now in the last 5 years, but I transitioned in 1998, and there were people being murdered before then, all throughout that time, at the same amount of numbers. But you're hearing about it now, and a lot of those are through intimate partner relationships. That's gone unsolved, or that was reported to the police department as not being transgender, but just as being MSM, men's men.
Right, yeah. And so let's dive into some of these statistics and think about the dynamics, because we've got to think through what's happening in our communities, how is this impacting people from seeking services, from seeking safety, and what are the barriers that they're coming up against in trying to access the services that we have. So one of the statistics that DA Boston shared was around transgender victims are more likely to experience intimate partner violence in the public sphere than other victims. So even if they're able to get to the point where they're accessing services or trying to request that kind of help, they're still not being met with open arms and services that are ready and able to serve them in the same capacity as heterosexual cisgender women. And so, right, those barriers are high. And for me, what that really means and the rallying cry here is that once somebody from our community is accessing services, calling law enforcement, getting the criminal legal system involved in their relationship, in their life, in the community, and trying to access these services, they've weighed out all the different fears that they have, all the different possible scenarios of discrimination, of being misgendered, of having the wrong pronouns used, of having your birth name used, all those different barriers present, and that is outweighing the fear of their partner. Right, and so they are more than ever in desperate need of services and desperate need of us to be ready to serve them. And so I really see it as, if we're having people access us, that is more than ever somebody we need to serve, because there's so many more people suffering in the community who haven't have the courage to come up against all those threats that have been made and the realities of discrimination and bias that they know that they're going to come up against and experience.
Just wanted to add up there, in reference to especially the last segment around youth, and so recognizing that a lot of our youth are on the streets because they're being put out by their parents for them being LGBT. So then one of two things happens. So either if it's somewhere in rural Georgia, they think, well, they're going to be safe when they get to Atlanta. The trip to Atlanta usually will end up in human trafficking, because they see someone that's vulnerable, that's willing to do anything they can to get to Atlanta, and then they get caught up into sex trade, okay? So then if it's here in Atlanta, kind of the same thing still happens, because they're out on the streets. So that means when you are now hanging out in downtown Atlanta, or actually anywhere in metro Atlanta where there's some nightclub, you'll see them hanging out early, around 10 o'clock at night, to try to get in for free, to meet somebody. And when they meet these people are older than they are. They are playing mind games with them and mistreating them, and then they think they're in a relationship when really, again, this leads to more sex trafficking. And so it becomes a spiral. They do pornos, they're doing sex work on the streets, survival sex, and then they also get into the system, which is usually the time that you all will meet them who works for DeKalb County. And it's not too late though. You can still save and help them. But I want you to be prepared and understand the community when you actually are engaging with them, and know that, the path that they took for them to get there, and that, you can be their angel to save them.
Yeah, wow. the opportunity that we have is very great. So let's talk about in our groups, I think we're moving into that section around, what are some additional, we'll break up, what are some additional barriers? We didn't have a chance to talk about all of them, but there are a lot of barriers that are facing folks in our community that we can unpack a little bit more. And then I want everyone to think about one change they might be able to make back in their organization, or their workplace, or their faith community, or something like that, someplace you're connected to that might help remove a barrier for someone from this community. And then think about, how do we build those bridges? How do we make connections where we can further educate ourselves, or make sure that we are doing some cross-training, like the great opportunity Chanel was talking about, to make sure that we are furthering working together. And then, did you have one more question for them?
We have three of them.
Three.
So
oh, not 4. Okay, we got 3. Okay, so perfect. So let's, maybe each group takes one question, and then
Sure.
we'll process back like that. Okay, so up here we'll have you guys do some additional barriers, and we'll process that. In the back, let's maybe think about some changes we can make. And then is the other one over here? Okay, great. And then maybe think about some ways to build bridges, so organizations we can connect to. We had a chance earlier to discuss some unique barriers that are facing victims of domestic violence who are identified as LGBTQ. And so I just wanted to take a couple minutes just to name and identify a few additional barriers that we know individuals are facing from this community when they're experiencing domestic violence. So do we have someone who's reporting back for this group who can walk us through a couple more things you identified? Thank you.
Hey.
All right, so we talked about barriers, and I hand it to this group because a lot of people talk about problems, but they are also problem solving. So I heard that going on, which was very cool. But general lack of acceptance was kind of the first thing that came up. And then some people spoke about the state of Georgia as a whole. Georgia's not, they feel like Georgia's not handling it, Georgia's not dealing with it, Georgia's not conversing about these things. Faith and religion come into the picture when you're having this conversation. For some people, it's fear of exposure. The way I think of that is if I go to law enforcement, this can turn into a case, this can turn into a news story, right? Maybe not everyone in my life knows, maybe my employer doesn't know. What could that mean for me? And then lack of resources for victims and family members in the community. What is out there? If people aren't having this conversation, there could be something, there may not be something, but I don't know, because it's not being talked about.
Great. Thank you so much. You hit upon some really important barriers that are facing folks when they are trying to access services or thinking about how to navigate through an abusive relationship. So, I think lack of acceptance and faith and religion, that's a huge role in a lot of people's lives, especially down here in the South. And thinking about the messages we're sent growing up about what does it mean if someone's gay or someone's trans, right? Oftentimes that's spun as a mental health issue for a lot of us. And so we definitely don't want to come forward and tell you what's happening, because we've probably been told by our abuser that, oh, they're just going to think you're crazy, right? You're going to affirm for everybody these stereotypes about what's happening in our relationship. And so that can be a further barrier in how we can see some of that play out. I also think that our community is small, and so sometimes coming forward means exposing other people in our community. If we're not out, our partner's probably not out, and especially thinking about the other forms of oppression a partner might be facing, we might not want to subject them to all the different biases and discrimination we talked about earlier, right? Because if my partner is trans and I come forward, I'm going to be outing them and putting them under a lot of different scenarios and situations that can further mistreat them. And this is someone I might care and love still. So there's a lot of additional barriers, and you got a lot of them. Okay, let's move to the second question, which was around some ideas of what you could do, some changes you might be able to make personally back in your own workplace or some sort of community you're a part of to address accessibility and services barriers. Who wants to represent group 2? Yay, thank you so much. Voluntold, right?
Yeah, so ours was the changes that you can make, and I think a lot of them focused on being proactive instead of reactive and finding opportunities. Acceptance was one that we started out with, which I think is just a very broad thing to say, but it's something that's very important that we need to focus on. Using correct pronouns, and if you don't know, then take it upon yourself to educate yourself so that you're speaking to individuals in the correct way and you're not being disrespectful. It's, just taking ownership of your own knowledge and education. So that kind of goes along with the training and education part of it. Also making yourself aware of the resources that are available to the LGBTQ community so that, in the event that you do speak with somebody who needs some help, you know how they can get help and you can help them. Also, being an advocate on social media. So, just thinking about myself, I use social media a lot, and I hadn't even thought about posting something about being here today. I need to do that so that if somebody is following me on Instagram or Facebook, they see, oh, Robert does care about this, and you never know. Somebody may see that and see, okay, there's an ally that I have. And then also this is, also around just educating yourselves, opportunities for educating children in schools. I think with violence in general, it's, you start young, start educating children early on. It'd be great if we didn't need to, but we do. And so that, that's the world we live in. And if we take a proactive effort, we can definitely change things. So that's a lot of ours was about just being proactive in a lot of different ways.
Some great ideas there. I really appreciate that. Yeah, I think there's a ton of things here that we can really dive into when you leave here today and think about around what is the culture in your community around this. What sphere of influence do you have? Right? What are forms that you use? What does your work culture look like? What are policies that you have in place around discrimination? What would make somebody think that it's okay to disclose their sexual orientation or gender identity? Right? Are there signs, stickers, some sort of something in your mission statement that reflects our community so that way we know it's a safe place to go? We didn't necessarily talk about this. Well, you kind of did about there's not a lot of protections for LGBTQ folks. We can still be fired for if you find out and you're our employer. There is no protections.
Or denied.
Yes. Right, so who are you hiring people from the LGBT community, right? We're much more likely to have lower socioeconomic, lower incomes, more unstable housing, and so thinking about how to support the community by making sure that when you're hiring that, you're promoting in the LGBT community as well, that you have an open position, so.
Correct, and
yeah.
if I have no job, I have no health insurance, so I'm not taking care of my mental health either.
Yeah, exactly. So it's far-reaching. Just thinking about that, and right, it is likely we all know somebody. We do all know somebody who's LGBTQ, right? And so whether they've disclosed it to us or not, you can't tell someone's sexual orientation, and you can't tell someone's gender identity by looking at them. And so again, the sphere of influence that you have, I think, is probably further reaching than you might know in talking about these issues. All right. And you started hitting on some great ways to make connections, which was our third group. So do we have a volunteer here? Thank you so much. I love all these men stepping up to.
Yeah. How you doing? Joram Mars. I'm in the Crime Strategies and Community Partnerships Unit, the DeKalb DA's office with Sherry Boston. Some of the things that we talked about were connecting to the school system early intervention, getting the conversation started. I think the biggest thing that everybody's been talking about with acceptance, I think another way to say that is recognition of the humanity of each other. Acceptance doesn't necessarily mean endorsement of whatever, may be going on, but it's acceptance of your right as a human being to be respected and to be dignified. So I think that's what we were all saying, and using our platforms and our different resources to show through policy, things like the anti-discrimination bill, adding LGBT community to that bill to show officially that, hey, we recognize you as a community, you have support. If you need to reach out, there is a platform for you to reach out. There's people who will support and show you love and respect. Promoting acceptance from within our own family systems and our own faith-based systems. I think that's very important, starting with small conversations, like how we had in our small groups right there, and eventually the small conversations turn into the larger conversations. We use people like Sherry Boston, who has a booming microphone, booming voice, and platform to say, hey, this is what everybody is saying, so everybody come along and join us. Connecting to agencies that serve the LGBT community, and also increasing the optics, things like the bathroom signs and things like that, showing again through that official policy and support. So when people see, oh wow, there's a bathroom, you know, a genderless bathroom, you know, that's acceptance. That right there is a form of informal acceptance, or a way of saying it without having to come directly to somebody and say it. But that goes a long way in showing the community that the LGBT community is supported.
Wow, thank you so much.
Thank you.
Yeah, those are some really great ideas. And yeah, I think the bathroom issue is one we know comes up, but creating a gender-neutral bathroom says volumes to a lot of folks who enter your places and communities. A lot of times we seek out those kinds of places too, where we know there's going to be that kind of sign or signal of safety that kind of sends to the community. Yeah. So, and then there was one more thing I was coming up. I was processing around. One of the stats was around the same-sex men were less likely to reach out to law enforcement, right, even after a near-lethal incident. And so thinking about other places in the community that folks might be reaching out or might show up, right? So I'm thinking the ER. I'm thinking urgent care. Where people might go for some sort of assistance around injuries, and targeting trainings with those communities or other connections we might have to those places in our communities around getting resources and training in for those medical professionals as well.
Okay. And I wanted to add a takeaway question that wasn't on this on here, which is, what is one law or policy you can ask your policymaker to create or pass to protect LGBTQ Georgians? There you go. I love it. Yes. Yes, and you know, session's starting right around the corner, and that's already a bill that's in there, so wonderful. Don't all jump up, but I want you to think about that as you're going away and as you're in your jobs. You're thinking, you know, what is something that we can do that's on the books that actually is definitely going to help, where we have a foundation. Because, you know, as somebody who does policy is a foundation. And then, of course, implementation is where everybody else will come in to make sure we're doing it the right way, right? Great, yeah.
Yeah, and so when, we passed out a copy of this brochure, which is just one resource that we've created to try to, again, make it known to folks in the LGBT community that services are available. And because they're not oftentimes going to reach out first to other sort of criminal legal folks, friends and family is going to be the place that we really do gain access and have those conversations. And so you'll see in here there's lots of different information, including the rights of LGBTQ folks to access services under VAWA. So it's come up today about some challenges around, you know, the names of a lot of DV programs that serve domestic violence victims, but every program that's certified in the state of Georgia provides services to any victim of domestic violence. So don't let that be a deterrent to making the referral, right? We can do the work to make sure that advocates are ready to respond in an appropriate way. That referral is still going to be life-saving to get them connected to that safety planning. So, and again, we're continuing to work with our other community partners around law enforcement to make sure that those barriers are being addressed, and doing the best work that we can to make sure we're supporting the community.
I want to say thank you to Sonia and DA Boston for the invitation today. You know, my name is Chanel Haley at Georgia Equality. I spoke to some of you around here. I know that many of you are interested in training. I want to point out to Raksha over here. I actually do training in a coalition with members from Raksha. around DV, the LGBTQ community. So I actually have to leave soon because I have 2 more, if I'm single too. But if you are willing, want to reach out, you want the assistance, come over here to see Aparna and she will connect everyone that needs to be there. Thank you.
Thank you so much.
Bye.
Good morning. Good morning. I know y'all are excited, right? And what I like to think about is layers. How many of you have heard the term intersectionality? Right. It's a great terminology to think about. We talked about working with teens and youth, right? We talked about working with the LGBTQ community. We've talked about working with elder and disabled and deaf communities, right? And the reality is that our communities intersect. No one just has that identity. So you can have a teen who is trans, right? Who might have a disability, who might also be immigrant. And those are the different layers that we would be working with different community members, and would our services look the same? Right? So there's even more barriers when we're talking about our communities, that we can't just put us in these little subsections, and that knowing that it can be very complicated. Here's the reality. A lot of people don't know how the system works. And in some counties, not DeKalb, but in some counties, the police work very closely with immigration. So Gwinnett County is an example. White County, Hall County, and Cobb County.
For the
287G communities.
Yes.
So if you're picked up by law enforcement, they may check your immigration status. And so that might get you back into the system of where you're being turned in. And while that may not happen in DeKalb, it doesn't matter. You hear those stories in media, what do you think? It's not safe to call.
It's easy to say, well, why didn't you call 911? But with all of this backdrop of, teens being afraid to, go to school because their parents may not be home, pastors, being deported, what do you think prevents an immigrant victim of domestic violence from calling the police? It's the same thing we talked about, fear. And the fear is something that permeates throughout the immigrant community. So not only are immigrant victims fearful, but that's creating a less safe community. What we love hearing, it makes us really happy. Not every agency is that way. And I understand what you're saying about dialect. Just because someone comes, may speak the Spanish language, there are different dialects, right? And they, it's really sometimes just difficult to get those translators. And so we're interpreting things in a language that may not be our client's first language.
So quick quiz. If you're having issues with dialects, is there an organization in the room that we could call if it's one of the Spanish dialects? They run our hotline. Cherokee Family Violence, and for Latin American Association also has connections, but I know Cherokee Family Violence is doing recruiting folks that may speak those indigenous languages, and also has connections to the Consul General's office, so they may have some ideas of how do you get those very difficult languages that they may speak. So I think that's something to definitely keep in mind.
Aparna ran through the, language access, creative ways to communicate with your client. We talked really quickly about law enforcement. We wish that everyone was like the gentleman over there. But I think what I want to make sure that you all realize, because there is a lot of mistrust in the community for immigrants, but there's also a lack of, understanding of what's going on, because when you hear all these laws being passed, you don't know who it's affecting. Immigration right now is a hot button issue. I've been doing immigration work for 20 years, and it's never been as hot button as it has been in the last 2 years. So just so I can, make sure that you all understand, I'm going to ask one question. How many of you all think that if there is an immigrant victim of crime, she has options to stay here? There are laws here to help her immigration-wise. Just raise your hand if you believe that. Good, because I want you to continue to believe that. One falsehood I want to make sure that we all know of is those laws have not gone away. How we execute those laws have become a little bit more challenging, but there are still immigration options. There's the T visa, U visa, VAWA for immigrant victims of crime. if someone's, or domestic violence. If someone is afraid to go to law enforcement initially, my recommendation, if you run into somebody in your church or you run into your neighbor, go to one of these organizations here. Because if we can talk to the client and let her know what to expect and what is going on, that information can either, allow our clients to feel empowered to make the right choice for them. And so please get all these, numbers. Contact us at GAIN, because when we can talk to the client, I know, Aparna, you've talked to clients before, just to let them know what is going on and the real hook. We don't want any fake news. We want the real thing that's going on, and that's our job, all of us in this room right now. That's what we choose to do. I've been educating for 20 years, but never has education been more important than it has been in the last 2 years. So immigration options are there.
And really quickly, the organizations that are doing immigration options, stand up real quick, so that way folks can get more information. Providing legal immigration options.
Yeah.
IWH.
1, 2, 3.
International Women's House. Tapestry. Kaminar. Cherokee Family Violence.
And Kind.
And Kind. Kind specifically works with kids who have been abandoned. So kids in need of defense. So if you're working with young folks, Kind is the way to go. And then, of course, Georgia Sovereign Immigration.
Of course.
And we are trying to get right back on track, so we are going to go right into our next session. And next we'll be taking a closer look at another marginalized group of victims and survivors, and that's women of color. More than 4 in 10 African American women experience physical violence from an intimate partner during their lifetime. And a 2015 Violence Policy Center study finds that African American women were 2.5 times more likely to be murdered by men than their white counterparts. More than 9 in 10 African American female victims knew their killers. African American females experience intimate partner violence at a rate 35% higher than that of white females, about 2.5 times the rate of women of other races. Joining us now with insight behind these numbers and more are Barbara Gibson, the Safe House Director for the Women's Resource Center to End Domestic Violence, and Ulester Douglas, the Associate Director of Men Stopping Violence. Please help me welcome them.
I am Barbara Gibson with the Women's Resource Center. We are obviously a DeKalb County-based agency serving survivors of domestic violence, and that's all survivors. As it happens, though, because of where we are, because of transportation issues, many of the women that we serve in the Safe House are Black women, women of color. And the stats that were mentioned today are very sobering. Part of what I thought we would talk about today is why these stats are true and what we can do about it. And part of what I think about why it's true in my experience of serving survivors is that a lot of us have this idea about what survivors look like, about what domestic violence survivors are supposed to be. And in many cases, we don't deem battered women that are Black to be appropriate kinds of survivors. We have an idea about what a good survivor looks like and what a not good survivor looks like. And if the survivor is not appropriately docile, if the survivor fights back, if the survivor is not what we might deem grateful for our services or maybe doesn't want to cooperate, then we determine that maybe she's not an appropriate victim and she's not worthy of our services. We really want to get to a place where we can determine that being a survivor of domestic violence is not one way to do that. However we walk in the world, however we show up in the world, we are still worthy and valuable of services. And it's our job as individuals to look at people. We don't want to look at our assumptions of people or our stereotypes about how people should be. We really want to see the person sitting in front of us, listen to what their individual experience is, and really relate to them based on that individual, unique experience of having survived domestic violence. So the other piece about why Black women are more likely to be harmed or less likely to reach out for services is because if I go for services and I don't believe that I'm going to be seen as an equal, valuable human being, then I'm going to be reluctant to do that. If I don't feel safe reaching out because I'm not sure about how the police are going to view me or view my spouse or my partner, if it's not safe, then of course that's going to prevent me from reaching out.
In terms of the stats, the first thing that came to mind for me when I looked at them was some skepticism. Let me acknowledge that. And the skepticism comes from my own critical thinking. First question is, who conducted these, right? And what were the methodologies? Who funded the studies? And I started there because, again, when studies are done particularly for marginalized communities, we have to be skeptical. Because most folks are not going to look at those stats and bring the kind of critical thinking that many of us would. And one of the conclusions might be that the issue of intimate partner violence against women is higher in communities of color, particularly in black communities, and reinforce some racist beliefs that somehow our community is, thank you. All right, put it up. Reinforce racist beliefs that somehow we're more violent, particularly if we're talking about black men. And that's another assumption I'm making here, is that in those studies, because most crimes are committed interracially, that we're looking at black men as it relates to violence against women, particularly black women. So that's the first thing. In terms of why, again, those numbers having said that, I do believe that might be accurate, and not necessarily because we are any more violent than any other racial group, but because of the structural environmental issues that I believe contribute to the issue of intimate partner violence. Let me be clear that is not to suggest that when we as individual men commit acts of violence against women that we, at least in the work we do at Men Stopping Violence, make any excuses for those beliefs. So we say, yes, as an individual man, I am responsible for the choices I make, but that individual decision has to be seen in broader contexts. We know agencies like the CDC and such other bodies that do these kind of research often talk about risk factors. And for us as an organization, one of the risk factors that we explore with men with whom we work and with communities is the notions around the extent to which men internalize what we call patriarchal ideals of masculinity. There is definitely a correlation between the extent to which men internalize those beliefs, those values, and the willingness to use violence against women. And certainly the men I work with, particularly African American men, we have our own brand of patriarchal, masculinity, but beyond the racial component of that, one of the tenets of that kind of masculinity is a commitment and a willingness to quote-unquote control your woman, to control women. And for us, that could be considered a risk factor. There are issues of structural inequality, issues around poverty and the like that we believe create the kind of stressors that I think compromise, I believe, choices. I really do. There are a lot of studies that talk about the issue of bandwidth when you're dealing with, all these other major social stressors and how we negotiate and move through our relationships and move through the world. And then you add to that another issue is just the skill, the knowledge and the skills about how to deal with issues of conflict when they arise. So part of the work we do at Men Stopping Violence is engage men in exploring the different kind of strategies, both cognitive and behavioral, in terms of what we can do to make nonviolent, non-abusive choices.
Right. So that brings us to our next point. We understand that domestic violence disproportionately impacts women of color, families of color, because there are systems in place that make this the case. And so what we thought we would explore today is the cultural norms and values that we all support, either consciously or unconsciously, that keep the roots of domestic violence really grounded deeply in our cultural consciousness, in our behaviors, in our actions, and really have a really short conversation now about where we find these behaviors, where these behaviors are hidden in our values, how we reinforce these ideas that violence is a normal response. And I heard somebody say earlier that it is not normal. But if you think about the steps, we recognize that domestic violence is common. And unfortunately, I have to say that it is normal now. It's not right, but it's a normal response because we haven't given ourselves the space to really think about the fact that there are other ways to really respond if you are not happy with another person's behavior. We haven't given ourselves enough support to really think about how we can manage ourselves when we feel uncomfortable or unpleasant. And we've decided as a community that violence is an appropriate response. And I think that probably everybody in this room has at some point or another condoned violence. And we think that if we have a justifiable reason, that is okay. But I have to tell you that batterers also think they sometimes have a justifiable reason. So we have to decide what cultural norms support violence, and in particular, what cultural norms and values support violence against people of color.
Let's give another round of applause to Barbara and Lester. Thank you so much. I really want to express all of my gratitude for our facilitators today. We could not put on this forum without their support, their guidance, their help, and their amazing wealth of information for our community. And we certainly want to educate, motivate, and inspire. We know that a coordinated community response like this one can truly make the difference in people's lives, and we hope that this year it has inspired you to take action. Domestic violence is not a private problem. It is our problem. None of us should ever look the other way. If we suspect someone is being abused, it will take all of us working together as a community to end domestic violence. In order to change lives, we need your help. We need you as family, friends, and neighbors who see domestic violence to believe a victim when they make an outcry and don't turn a blind eye to what you're observing. Too many times, the domestic violence fatality, the people in the victim's life connect the dots after a death. Help connect the dots before the ultimate price is paid. Help the victim connect with emergency and support services. Seek guidance from professionals in the field, especially if you're considering confronting an abuser. This can be very dangerous. Let the victim know you will always be there. Leaving an abusive relationship is dangerous and complicated. Do not get frustrated if the process takes longer than you think it should take. Assist with gathering evidence that can later be used in court. Take pictures. Be willing to provide a statement to police and work with prosecutors when they need your testimony. Remember, we're all in this together. Now I want to introduce a very special guest who knows firsthand the traumatic effect domestic violence can have on loved ones. Mrs. Patrona Bryant James has been in the human service profession for 27 years and has served with the following state and private entities: the Georgia Department of Family and Children's Services, private sector adoptions, private early early education, the Georgia Department of Juvenile Justice, the Fulton Juvenile Court, and the Fulton Department of Senior Services. She is a certified social worker and a certified public manager who holds a bachelor's degree in criminal justice and a master's in public administration. Ms. Bryant James is a native of Savannah, but has resided in the metro Atlanta area for the past 22 years, along with her husband Anthony, her son Amari, and her daughter Jai. Throughout her career, Ms. Bryant James has worked with thousands of deprived, delinquent youths and families, as well as senior citizens and caregivers. This population has included victims of abuse, family domestic violence, sexual exploitation, and other traumas. Ms. Bryant James has also been personally impacted by domestic violence. On October 5th, 2016, her younger sister, Patrice Bryant, was murdered by her boyfriend in Savannah, Georgia. Ironically, Ms. Bryant James had accepted a position on the board of Harm's Way a mere 30 days prior to receiving the devastating call about the death of her sister. Ms. Bryant James soon realized that the harm's way call to action was, in some way, preparing her for a journey in which she would have to find purpose in her pain.
I firmly believe that our experience either define us or refine us. I chose the latter. Patrice's path may have been different from mine, but we loved each other just the same. It is because of that love that I like to share my thoughts on how we can help marginalized people move past the trauma of domestic violence to find purpose from their pain. I surmise that one of the most effective tools we can use in what I refer to as the LSNN, or LISTEN principle. LISTEN is an acronym for Life Matters, Silence Kills, No Time for It, and No Judgment Zone. So now this is going to be a little interactive because it's after 12. So when I point to you, I'd like for you to say, listen. So let's try it right now. Listen. Awesome. Life matters. Abusers, victims, families, communities, everyone needs to realize that everybody's life matters. Regardless of your age, your religion, your sexual identity, your cultural identity, your socioeconomic status, everyone's life matters. No one is above anyone else. And so individuals who are experiencing this must know that their life matters. And individuals who are coming into contact with people who experience this must also understand that regardless of what you see or what you hear, their life matters. In recognizing this, one of the first steps is to listen. Silence kills, literally and figuratively speaking. When people don't tell what's being done to them or share what they're doing to others, that can kill. When people don't tell the experiences they are having, that can cause death of the spirit, of the mind, and in worst cases, the body. Therefore, we must speak up and encourage people to speak out. We must use an empathic ear and our reflective listening skills so that we can regurgitate what it is they're saying to make sure we have the story straight, but also so that we can find the most appropriate resources for them. Therefore, we must always listen. No time for it. I said what I said, and I mean what I say. There's no time for domestic violence. One of the national campaigns of domestic violence is Put a Nail in It. And for the past 3 years, and probably, well, no, not probably, for the past 3 years and until the day I die, I will wear this purple nail on my left ring finger to symbolize that I have taken a vow to put a nail in it. When people see me, some people think, oh, it's an accent nail, and that's okay. Because anything that we can do to spark the discussion is okay with me. A lot of people don't know that October is Domestic Violence Awareness Month. We definitely know about breast cancer awareness. But understanding that we have a mission regarding this as well will definitely help people speak up and speak out. If Put the Nail in It is a motto or a theme, I think No Time for It should be an anthem. Domestic violence. No time for it. family violence. No time for it. Teen dating violence. No time for it. Elder abuse. No time for it. I've taken my stand. Are you? Will you? No time for domestic violence. Lastly, this, as we've heard today, must become a no judgment zone. We cannot judge. Judge lest ye be judged. Also, you never know someone's situation or circumstance. The reason why some people don't think that their life matters is because people judge. We heard it today. Well, that's a man fighting a man. Or she wants to be a man, so fight like a man. The reason why some people won't speak up and silence is figuratively and literally killing them is because we judge. They're homeless. They're alcoholics. They're drug addicts. They don't want help. We judge. But we have to, again, use that empathic spirit to not just sympathize with people, but to empathize, to actually put ourselves in their place so that we can understand that judging is not for us. Helping is what we should do. I'm still happy. I apologize. Beyonce has a song. It's called Listen. And the chorus is very profound, and it speaks to the heart of what we're saying today. It says, listen, I am alone at a crossroad. I am not safe in my own home. And I've tried and tried to say what's on my mind. You should have known. That's deep. You should have known. I struggle with the fact that my sister was suffering. Thank you. I struggle with the fact that my sister was suffering, but for whatever reason, she didn't want to share that particular struggle with me. Like I said, she had some challenges. So when we talked, or when I went home to visit her, or the one time that she came up here to visit me, she would always say things like, I gotta use her voice, sis, I'm doing real good. Sis, I found a new job. I'm thinking about going back to school. And I'm like, do it. My sister was brilliant. She didn't have a high school diploma, but she was brilliant. And so I would encourage her. But never did she say, he is beating me. And it saddens me to think that I've helped thousands, and when I say thousands, I really mean thousands of people over the past 27 years through my work at DFACS, through my work at the Department of Juvenile Justice, the Fulton Juvenile Court, as well as Department of Senior Services, where I am now. Even in my family, I can recall, even as a teenager and going through everything I was going through with losing my mom in my freshman year, family members would ask me for information and guidance on things. And so people still do that to this day. But I couldn't help my sister. So, what I've decided is that I'm going to continue doing what I'm doing. And as you heard Ms. Brown say, I accepted a position on the board of Harm's Way Incorporated 30 days before I got the call about my sister. I didn't even know this lady. We were sitting down in a meeting, and after the meeting was over, she said, oh, there's something about you. And she started telling me her story about her sister being murdered in the CNN Center. And I was like, wow, I remember that story. And she said, yeah, that was my sister. So I founded this organization, and I'm writing a book talking about our story, and I just really think that you would be somebody that would be, just an integral part of my team. And I said, well, I'm on a lot of different boards. I do a lot of work in the community. And I said, this is a mantle that I can take on as well. Never even fathoming that a month later, I'd be getting that call. So when we talk about calls to action, that was mine. That was God's way of preparing me for what was to come. I leave you today with one thought, and that is we must listen. We must understand that life matters, that silence kills, that there's no time for it, and that it should be a no judgment zone. In closing, I'd like to read for you the victim impact statement that I gave at the court on October 1st. If any of you recall, I said my birthday was October 1st. So normally, I take a trip every year somewhere. But this year, I wasn't able to do that. This year, I was sitting in the Chatham County Superior Court at the trial of the man who murdered my sister. 3 years almost to the day. He accepted a plea, life with the possibility of parole, after 29 years. So when he's 75 and I'm 70, however, if the Lord spares my life and the creek don't rise, I will be in a Georgia prison speaking on behalf of Patrice. My name is Patrona Bryant James. In September of 2016, I was asked to serve on the board of Harm's Way Incorporated, a nonprofit organization founded by the sister of a woman shot down in cold blood by her boyfriend in the CNN Center 10 years ago. I accepted the invitation to serve because as a social worker and a public administrator, that's what I do, and that's who I am. Never in my wildest dreams would I have thought that I'd receive a devastating call about my own sister just 30 days later. I was in meetings most of the day, and Patrice's sister, Lisa, kept calling me. When I finally was able to answer my phone, she said, "That boy done killed Patrice." I was so taken aback. My response was, "Who? My sister Patrice?" Lisa went on to tell me about a body being in a house and the police not being able to go in. But I was so filled with hurt and rage that I angrily said, "I'll call you back," and hung up the phone. I sat in my office and cried like a baby because I had accepted the call to take up the fight against domestic violence. But I didn't think I'd have to do it on behalf of my own sister. I want everyone to know that Patrice was an intelligent, kind-hearted young woman who was dealt some challenges in her life. More importantly, she did not deserve the abusive hand that Mr. Gatson dealt, that Mr. Gatson battered her with, nor the death sentence to which Mr. Gatson condemned her. I left Savannah in 1997, so Patrice and I kept in contact via phone. Every time Patrice called me, she wanted me to know she was okay. However, I now know that was all a facade. Patrice was literally sleeping with the enemy. Mr. Gadsden is the worst kind of coward, a woman beater, intimidator, and murderer. Unfortunately, his family will feel the pain of his absence, just as we feel the devastation over the loss of Patrice in such a brutal way. Nevertheless, Mr. Gadsden's family still has the option to see and talk to him. All we have is a space in the cemetery. But I digress. Enough about Mr. Gadsden. Patrice was loved by all who knew her, and she in turn loved her mother, her children, her family, and her friends. Patrice loved hard, and Patrice loved strong. The one thing that gives me solace is that every time we talked or saw each other, Patrice was quick to say, "Love you, sis." Since Patrice was murdered 3 years ago, I have worn a purple nail on my left finger. I will do so until the day I die, so that everyone who comes into contact with me will know and understand that I have pledged to put the nail in domestic violence. Abusers and victims alike must realize that there is a better way, and that no one should live or die like Patrice did. I am the voice of my sister, and I want the world to know that Patrice was here. Hopefully, her story will help save someone. I pray that God has mercy on Mr. Gadsden's soul, but his body needs to suffer. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Patrona, and I'll let you get back to your seat, but I'm going to need you to come back up here because we have something for you. Thank you so much. We just want to give you this beautiful blessing of roses and flowers, hydrangeas, on behalf of the DeKalb County District Attorney's Office. Thank you so much for sharing Patrice with us today. Thank you.
Take a picture, sorry.
One second. I'm going to have Patrona, you stand right here. I've got one more. Next to our lovely balloon bouquet, I just want to also recognize Angela Butts. This is the third year she has donated our beautiful DV balloon backdrop. If you could come on up, Angela, we also have a bouquet of flowers for you as well. Thank you so much for always supporting us, and I'm going to have you stay right there because we're going to take some pictures. Thank you so much to everyone for participating in our symposium today. I encourage all of you to contact the District Attorney's Office or any of our partners here today if and when you or someone you need, might need help. We must all continue working to help survivors to get the help that they need, and we need to do more to change the attitudes that perpetuate domestic violence. Thank you for being a part of this coordinated community response and this year's call to action to survivors on the margin. Thank you again to our sponsor, Commissioner Marita Davis-Johnson, our facilitators, our panelists, and our partners who have participated in our resource fair today. I especially want to thank the members of the District Attorney's Office who, without their assistance, we could not do this today. I like to say that I have the best team in the whole world. And I'm being honest, y'all, I have the best team because they make my job look easy. And they do that because they do make my life look easy. They are just as committed and passionate about the work that I get to do every day, and I get to be out in the forefront. So I want to especially thank Chastity Rogers, Angel Riley, Sonia Brown, Yvette Jones, Roz Harris for getting here bright and early and making sure that this was a success. And I also want to thank my chief assistant, Jenny Stolarski, who is off on another project of ours, but also is a fierce force behind domestic violence, not only today and what we do in the month of October, but making sure that she helps lead those efforts inside the district attorney's office. I'd also like to thank everyone from my office who's here, helped facilitate, helped be a part of this day. If you could once again stand up and raise your hand so that you can be recognized. Thank you. Tabitha, Tom, everybody. Thank you so much. Thank you to DCTV and the other media friends for providing coverage for our event, and for all of you who joined us either today live or those of you that are watching this at home or on social media, for helping us raise awareness and shine a spotlight on this problem during National Domestic Violence Awareness Month. If you haven't already done so, please take a moment to fill out your no more signs and to show your commitment to a safer community. Take a selfie with it, post it to your social media, and let us take a picture to post to ours. Tag us on social media using hashtag Boston Building Bridges and hashtag No More. More importantly, continue the work of building DV awareness in your own homes and communities. Let your voice be heard, or be a voice for the voiceless. Together, we can end domestic violence. Thank you. My name is Sherry Boston. It is my honor and my privilege to serve you every day as your DeKalb County District Attorney. As we come to the end of another month of domestic violence awareness, I'm struck by the fact that this is the end of, like I said, our 9th year of doing this symposium. And usually when you're counting down the annual things you do, it's an exciting time. This is an event that I would absolutely love not to have next year in DeKalb County. Next October, instead of holding our 10th annual event, I would love to be holding a celebration that speaks to the fact that we no longer have this epidemic in our community. And those are the people in this room that work hard every day to end domestic violence. I know that you stand with me in that pledge and in that promise and that desire and that hope and that dream. That we don't have to have this month, that we don't have to wear purple, that we don't have to wear these ribbons. And instead of having any more victims, we are filled with survivors that are celebrating that enough is enough. We can continue to do that. It might not be next year. It might not be in 2020. But I would love to see this happen so that my daughters, who are 11 and 13, can grow up in a world where there is no domestic violence. Thank you so much for being with us today. Thank you for your presence, and thank you for your support.